and it'll stabilize. My fingers. All right, this is a lot of editing. Hey, Rainbow here, and welcome to my channel. I am not putting my ugly mug on the screen today for you, give you a little bit of a break from my face. Anyway, Ducati has an issue on the Multistrada. Now, I don't know if this was corrected for the Pikes Peak edition that's coming out maybe next month, who knows? But what I can tell you is that for the 2021 and 2022 version of the Ducati Multistrada, this is an issue. Now, first thing I'm going to tell you is this spring right here is for your side stand, okay? This spring helps keep the side stand up when it's not obliterated like this. What I could tell you is when we first got this, it had a technical service bulletin or a service bulletin to replace the spring. I don't know if the spring was defective. What I believe was wrong with the spring is that the spring was on upside down, therefore making it much closer here to the shifter, which is ultimately what the problem is. So none of us live in a perfect world. I know I cannot afford a ticket to perfect world, but what happens is if you go and when this spring is actually on the right way and it's not bad, when you go to shift, if you have the kickstand down, now that's what I'm saying, it's not a perfect world. It happens. It just happened to me the other day. I was in line at Costco waiting to get gas. And while I was waiting to get gas, I got tired of standing there, sitting there. So I just put the kickstand out, got off the bike, took my key out, opened up the gas tank to get it ready because I was next in line, and sat back on the bike. And all of a sudden they started moving in front of me. So I quickly forgot that I had the side stand down. I didn't see, I didn't notice the red bar that shows up in the display. And I quickly shifted down, and when you shift down, that's exactly what happens right there, okay? So what happens is this gets hung up behind the spring, and it jams it down. And then, now it's easy because the spring is shot. But normally, when you shift down and it gets hung up underneath there, you literally can't get it out, and the only way that you get it off, you have to pry it off, and when you pry it off, you stretch the spring out like you see right here, okay? Now, with that being said, this happened to me once, and it was taken care of under the service bulletin because I believe it was happening because the spring was on upside down, and it just happened to me again. Now, the penalty for accidentally shifting, trying to go into first gear when the kickstand down, should not be having to replace a spring because this is literally so close, okay? That should not be the penalty for this, okay? The penalty should basically be that maybe it stops you from doing it, but it happens. So as you can see here, the spring is shot again and I have to replace it. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm going to replace this spring. Again, this is going to be now the third spring, the one that came from the factory, the one that was replaced with the service bulletin, and now this one. Now, to be on my third spring in 16,000 miles, not so bad, but this is a defect that absolutely needs to be addressed because this is just way too close. Now, for me to change all of this linkage to try to raise this up, I'm already comfortable with this. This is where I like it. This is where I want it. This is a good position for me. And, the last thing that I want to do is have to redo and readjust all of this just to raise this up a little bit. It's just a bad location for the shifter and the spring, and I really wish that this was taken care of. So let's go ahead and replace this spring. All right, so one of the things you're going to notice is that the most stretch that the spring has is when it's about halfway, okay? A little more than halfway, maybe about 3/4 of the way, okay, about right here. In order to take the spring off, what I've noticed is that in the up position is when it appears to have the least amount of tension on it. So that's when I'm going to, that's the position I'm going to leave it in order to take it off. And the tool of choice is going to be decent set of needle nose, like medium, medium to large size needle nose. So let's take care of this. As you can see, that came off pretty easy, and the bottom is just easier to do now. Okay, so this is what the spring looks like that came off. As you can see, it's not in the best shape. It's stretched, bent. All right, obviously this happened more than once. And this is the spring. It's actually, if you can see that, it's actually two springs right here. Okay, this is the spring that's going back on. Okay, so all right, so I'm trying to do this one-handed because of the microphone. I'm setting up something a little bit different. Anyway, the bottom line is the first thing you're going to do is when you put the small spring inside the larger spring is put the bottom like this, hook it with it out. When it came from the factory the first time, it was like this, and what that does is that raises this barrel part of the spring up higher towards this. It's got to be underneath it so that these sections of the spring aren't like this, because if they're like this, of course they're going to be significantly higher and closer to the shifter. So the bottom line is make sure that the bottoms go in like this, then I'm going to put it up and stretch them on right now. Okay, now that we have these on, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this to the up position. Okay, so my first thought was that I was going to put on the big one first and then put the other one through it, but then you won't be able to get it into the bottom hook, okay? So what I'm going to do here is I actually am going to put the thinner, smaller inner one on first because it's easier and it'll stabilize my fingers. I know what I want to use. I want to use a pair of dikes because it'll hold it better for me. But if I do that, I risk cutting through them. I got to use dikes, even though I'm going to risk cutting through them. Dikes will hold better. Okay, anyway. So I used a pair of dikes, so you don't want to cut through them because they hold better than a pair of needle nose. Needle nose have a tendency to really slip off, and as you can see, when they slip off, you end up screwing up your cuticles. All right, so now let's go to the other one. Make sure I have space and add it on, and it's almost that simple. Way better. Way better. Way better. Look at that. All right, and only one injury, not bad. All right, so if you're asking yourself really what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is this. When this kickstand is loose because of that screwed up spring, it doesn't hold nicely like this. It's actually often rides like this, and if you hit a bump, it comes down, and guess what happens if you're in gear and this switch gets activated? Yep, it shuts the motorcycle off, which is exactly what was happening with me when I was coming in and hitting some bumps as I was stopping, bringing my foot back, bumping this. It was bouncing down, and it was shutting off the bike. So I was wondering, why does this thing stall when I come in to a stoplight? Or, especially if I stop aggressively and it's a bumpy road. This comes down, the bike shuts off. The bottom line is, this is really not a good design. When it's up, obviously there's not a problem at all. It works perfectly fine. And if when it's on the right way, we don't have this binding up against the shifter at all, which it would do right in here. But now I just have to keep remembering not to attempt to shift. This normally kind of stops you and it goes, hey, you can't do that. But when you are in a hurry, you're not looking down, you think the shifter's up, boom, it goes behind it, but now it's fixed. So this is Rainbow. If you like this little doohickey here, like and subscribe. If not, like and subscribe anyway. I'd really appreciate it. Anyway, this is Rainbow, and I am out of here. So long.